Okay. What should a non-U.S. ICO do to limit its U.S. regulatory risk in terms of structuring the onboarding of investors in the ICO as well as marketing?
Oh, just don't offer them to U.S. investors, right? So that's one solution. And
what does that mean in reality, and how do you actually... because you can just say that, right? But does that really protect you?
Sure. No, and I can get into more detail like after, but one of the things that I have done in practice is that we have plugged in KYC APIs to do that data collection, right, for the KYC portion of it. But as far as like registration goes, then there are exemptions that exist for offering to non-U.S. citizens, right? So you would have to kind of do that KYC to
non-U.S.
ensure...
persons. Non-U.S. persons, right, rather than citizens. Non-U.S. persons.
Right, non-U.S. persons. There are exemptions that exist, but there are also ways to do it without the stringent registration as well. So you might want to look into like Reg A, Reg A+, that sort of thing. There are solutions, and we always, in our practice, try to take as forensic as a look into the coin as possible. We do some jurisdiction shopping because redundancies are the best thing ever created. You just don't want to have one point of failure anytime. So I'd be happy to talk to you about it after. But that's actually a record. Like, we talked for 15 minutes before we got an ICO question. Congratulations. So one of the things that I do love about Bitcoin is that it's the ultimate troll, because you can break the laws of man, but you just cannot break the laws of mathematics. And it just gets around those predatory legacy systems in such a way that cannot be stopped. And I think it's one of the most beautiful things about Bitcoin generally. But I digress. It was a bit of a segue. Does anybody have any more questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
The microphone, or I'm loud enough?
You can yell it out.
Okay. My name is JJ, and thank you so much for doing this. I'm a community manager for Ethereum, Latin America. And as you all know, Ethereum is so much about smart contracts, you know? So my question is, how do you see the rise of a new set of body laws called Lex Cryptographia, or cryptographic law, you know? Right now, I think Panama is so interesting because we expose merchant law in Panama. You know, we see those ships going out, you know, to the Canal of Panama, and we still hold on to this like old set of body laws called merchant law. How do you see the rise of executing code where you have like the law embedded into the code, you know, like cryptographic law? How do you see the future of platforms like Ethereum, for example? You know, I want to get your opinion about how do you see the rise of law firms developing their own, you know, like auto-executable code, you know, smart contracts. How do you see the rise of that, you know?
Well, as a former strident maximalist, I can say that I'm actually very excited to see what's happening on the Ethereum blockchain. I think it will obviate a lot of our antiquated systems. As far as regulators, you know, brushing up and sort of advancing to understand how these processes work. I mean, dude, they can't even answer a letter in 6 months. What do you expect, you know? So what I'm actually seeing is a lot of execution between private parties, more so, and a lot less adversary. Interestingly, a lot less adversary, because even at the firm, we have not had one issue in years of somebody going like, I signed this contract and this and that happened. I think smart contracts are just obviating a lot of those issues because there's so much consensus that goes into their creation sometimes. And I mean, this is very general, of course. But as I think we're moving away from, you know, regulators being the sort of be-all, end-all, and people are starting to take a lot more personal responsibility. And interestingly, I was just reviewing a smart contract just yesterday for a client. So we're getting a lot of that coming to the law firm, like, hey, can you review this solidity for us? And so we take a look at it, and then we send it out to a third party, you know, with a report. And they come back with a report, and sometimes we do another level because, you know, again, different layers are good. That's how you make things better, right? But I don't know if 3 or 4 years ago, people were going to firms with solidity contracts, you know? So it's really interesting and new.
Hello there. My name is Caleb. I come from Mexico.
Hola.
Hi. The realm is quite interesting these times, but we're looking forward into a situation in where we're going to have this structured and control side of the blockchain due to the state's policy, and the law of mathematics, the rule of law that is taking place between all these companies that are finding consensus on what's right and what's not. Obviously, it's kind of the law of the jungle sometimes. You have these companies that state an ICO, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. The people have to take responsibility in investments. But what's going to happen when this is just a doubt out of the top of my mind. What's going to happen when we have this, I believe it's going to be three systems interacting. The state systems, like in the US, Canada, when they're going to say, okay, this is right, this is wrong. The one that's going to happen outside of them because they are isolating themselves from the rest of the world. Some of them just don't want to deal with that anymore. That's what we've been discussing. And the laws that are taking place inside independent states. There's going to be some kind of consensus in the middle. The point is what are the steps we're taking toward that? Because we have international law has to get to a point in which it says, okay, this is right, this is obviously over the top. We are most certainly putting too much red tape around it, and this is just not fair. Where is the middle point? Is there an initiative for an international consensus about it? Have we, personally, I've heard this a lot, but nobody's talking about the middle ground. I think there should be some talk about it. In the States, what's the point about this?
En Estados Unidos?
Yep.
Okay, so there has been a uniform code just to kind of bring some clarity to this whole state-by-state nonsense that I told you guys about. But I don't really think any of the states have adopted it as to date, you know, because as usual, everybody would just kind of like to you know, go on with a comfortable, inefficient way as long as possible, you know, until somebody else starts to see the benefits of the revenue that, you know, evolving from that does, right? And the money transmitter licenses in the States is a moneymaker for them. So it's going to be hard for them to just say, yeah, to hell with that. But, you know, they could always have a fee, for example. You want to offer this to to the citizens of our state? Then it's a $5,000, $10,000 application fee, and we need to see your FinCEN registration. I mean, there are ways to go about it, but you know, the old way is more comfortable, I suppose.
So it's all going to end up with money. You just pay for it, and that's the end of it. If you do something wrong, you have liability, and that's my point exactly. Somebody paid for a license, somebody started working in some way, some part in the world, but there's some type of liability. Somebody says, hey, that's not fair for me. Where does he look for the law, for the rule of law there? That's my point. How are we going to protect the user? Yeah, we can do it through electronic contract, to self-regulation. That's okay. But wouldn't it be better if the states, different countries, just sit together and put kind of an international rule of law for this? I've just been talking about it with different lawyers in Mexico, with the Chamber of Digital Commerce, sometimes in the US, sometimes this came up. But right now I see all this as protectionism from different states, obviously.
Well, I think you should start this movement to help them see that there is a better way to do things, perhaps. That would be nice. It would make my job a lot easier, for sure. But I have no confidence in state regulators doing anything quickly. So I'm sorry that I don't have a very positive answer for that. It's just...
No, it's okay. It's just not being done. Okay.
Right. But removing ambiguity would be awesome. So let's just do like one last question, and then we will go have coffees and go talk to each other.
What potential is there for smart contracts to be used in areas such as employment law and family law?
Well, what potential? I think there is enormous potential for smart contracts to help in all of these areas. I think the thing that I would think about is the adoption, and we're seeing more adoption of that. I haven't seen this arise in these areas as yet. They're so much more popular with like ICOs or raising funds, right? But I certainly would like to see a framework that addresses that. And I know you're a young lawyer, so maybe you should lead the charge on that. That would be amazing. All right, guys. I just have one last thing to say, and then I'll let you go. Does anybody, by the show of hands, does anybody remember that movie from the 90s with Sinbad where he was a genie? Just show of hands. Put your hands up. Yeah, you guys remember that movie? Show of hands again, let me see. Yeah, right. So that movie kind of never happened. It actually never happened. But for some reason, it has permeated the culture, and people actually think this movie happened. Everybody thinks this movie has happened. I talked about this yesterday. Because of the amount of cognitive dissonance that just kind of permeates our society. So the last thing that I actually want to say is that don't believe anything, not even anything that I have said today, right? We live in a golden age of information, and I want to leave you with that. Look up everything, cross-check everything, get some second eyes on it, get some fourth and fifth opinions, and let us advance to the next level and stop taking the decisions of authorities as word. And that's it. Have an awesome afternoon, and take care.